Welcome, martial arts fans and global martial arts enthusiasts, to the 7th World Kungfu Championships. We are here to celebrate the arts and the forms of traditional WUSHU. Many know it as Kung Fu. The 7th World Kungfu Championships come to you live on location from the Sichuan International Tourism Trade Expo Center here. It is a beautiful city, Emeishan city, in the gorgeous province of Sichuan. Wonderful, generous people, the very best food this broadcaster has ever had. Fans and tourists, I recommend the Sichuan hot pot. Here at the World Championships, we have over 3,000 athletes from dozens and dozens of countries representing the true diversity of the Chinese martial arts. And today, this afternoon, day 2, the afternoon session, you are in for a treat. We will showcase the traditional forms. It is a competition, yes, but it is about expressions of individuality, martial artistry, athleticism. The World Championships are also about history, culture, philosophy, friendship. It's so much more than just a competition. We will be on carpet 2 this afternoon. There's a look at some of the judges and officials. And today we will celebrate sword play, the weaponry of the Chinese martial arts, the broadsword, the southern broadsword, the straight sword. We will see competitors work with the cudgel and with the staff. And we'll have much curiosity and many questions, and my broadcast partner will help us with that today. He is an expert, lifelong WUSHU practitioner. He was a competitor here at the 6th World Kung Fu Championships and a competitor all of his life. And an IWUF accredited referee and judge. He is my friend, Tony Sims. How are you tonight,
Hello,
Tony?
Robin. How are you?
It's been some great action and demonstration and artistry over the last few days.
Sure, it's truly a festival of Chinese martial arts. We have our introduction of judges.
And we see those judges. They have a stressful and very big responsibility over these days. Work incredibly long hours, and they'll meet before and after and go over the work of the day and the next day. Tony, what do you prefer? Observing and sharing your observations with the audience, or spending a weekend judging?
Well, I think I enjoy both. I enjoy very much sharing this experience of Chinese martial arts, so we increase our awareness with our viewers out there, but I also enjoy judging.
I see 2 playing surfaces, those carpets, and that is what we will be seeing today. The broadsword, men and women of a variety of ages, broadsword, southern broadsword, straight sword. They are separated into age groups, the cudgel and staff to end the afternoon. And you called the Kung Fu Championships a festival. Tony, tell our viewers what you mean.
Well, you know, we have such an array of Chinese martial arts here, and you've very accurately mentioned during the broadcast, Robin, that we both want to celebrate excellence in Chinese martial arts, but also appreciate the broad span of Chinese martial arts across multiple age categories. So it's one of the few competitions that we can see very young competitors as well as our very senior competitors. We can see competitors who are relatively new to their martial arts training and those who have spent a long time training. We also see this range of martial arts as we see one of our spectators there from Italy, from all corners of the world. So it really does bring together such a broad range of traditional Kung Fu styles. We also see some of the contemporary styles and so many of the different forms and styles of Chinese martial arts.
The men's Group C. Group A are our youngest men. We've seen as young as 4 and 5. And there's a Group A of women too. B, the youths. C, you know, think of you're an adult, and D, a senior. And that's a loose grouping of the age groups. We will see Group C here, and you mentioned all around the world. You can see right there as you look up and down our list of the 20-odd. There's 25, Radic from Russia, right literally across the board. And there will be the first 8. Really enjoyed the morning session, Tony. Those of you who saw it will have enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can find it on IWUF YouTube page. Day 2 morning session. We learned a lot about the broadsword from you, Tony. The extension of the body.
Yes, the movement of the broadsword is very distinctive in its wrapping, slashing, thrusting. Here we will see our next group of broadsword. It's a very popular weapon, so I'm not surprised that we have large categories of broadswords.
As a viewer, it's easy to connect to. When you're a young man, whether you've played with a sword or watched movies, or it's an easy concept to connect to, but a complex tool and weapon in the Chinese martial arts. He still has not pulled out the sword there. No, still on this. There it is. As we see the movements and the stances, does the traditional broadsword connect more to any particular style of Kung Fu that we saw with the empty hands?
No, no. All of the various styles that we have seen, for the most part, include some type of weapon. Some of them don't have all of the various weapons in their styles, but it is quite common for the bare hand styles that we've seen thus far to also include some weapons. There are a number of traditional Chinese martial arts weapons. Some of the styles may not have forms for those weapons, but some of the more standard weapons, such as broadsword, dao, jin, straight sword, staff, and spear, you very often see the styles have some form of that weapon. So we see Ratnasari from Sri Lanka showing us broadsword, and this again, Robin, was one of the compulsory broadsword legends, taking movements from many styles of broadsword. And as we pointed out, some of the contemporary forms include Nandu or some of those more acrobatic movements.
And as a young martial artist learning the broadsword, you would learn to visualize multiple attackers here as you make your way through this battlefield?
This form, the compulsory form, has 4 sections, and it's designed to really display the practitioner's use of the floor inside those white boundary lines. So they are attacking and striking up and down, around.
Fascinating to watch sometimes. Their breath, you know that through something like this, intuitively we know that they are breathing, but until the very end of it, when they relax, you can see just how taxing it is.
This looks to be one of the more traditional broadsword forms.
Man from New Zealand.
Very clean wrapping technique. Strong stances. It's a very good display of broadsword technique.
That wrap you talked about is just as we see there. And when I asked you about it this morning, it's like a defensive maneuver as you protect the body.
Correct. Many of the movements in the broadsword, if they are not offensive, striking out, also used to protect.
You see it there. Most people don't think of a weapon as sort of a barrier between, you imagine blocking an attack, but as a barrier to just kind of protect, as a bladed protection. Very smooth. You see the full extension of his body.
And that's what you want to be able to see. Again, he's wearing one of the more traditional Hongar type uniforms. You want, with even an untrained eye, to be able to look at the technique and see clarity in the movement, balance, speed, power. Here's our Russian competitor, Ivan, showing us again a two-handed broadsword, slightly different in shape, or very different in shape than the broadsword that we saw earlier, but one of the traditional broadswords.
We saw some incredible two-handed sword play in this morning's session. We're seeing some again here today. There's something very beautiful about working the two-handed weapon. And these moments where they go from flowing and slashing to freezing is very impressive. You can see, as you said, the untrained eye even can recognize both the beauty and the challenge in doing that. It's an interesting, you raise an interesting point as people, dedicate their life to become better and better judges, that sometimes stepping back and just saying, how does this look? How does this look to somebody as they look on? Is a really interesting perspective.
And he's been rewarded. Moving into first place. We still have a large field of competitors.
25.
Kabuki from Japan, I believe.
there. It doesn't take a lot of experience with this weapon to see that. All of this free-flowing movement, and then when he will stop. A little wobble there. And the control that the changing of direction of the weapon requires. So as they pass the weapon off into your other hand, what do you call that? Sheathing? Well, does it have a name as you take it from your weapon hand?
No.
It's just a safe place that you put it.
Usually if you are going to strike, the broadsword, actually, Robin, this is a good point for our competitors. Both hands actually very active, and looks like Dennis from Russia will show us. Even when the sword hand is working, the other hand is blocking, pushing.
Always has a function. Great work this afternoon already.
We've seen some very strong performances.
7号最后得分9.11分，8号上场，9号准备。
And they keep moving. We get a stronger one and then another strong one as they keep pushing each other out. Chong Ka Chong, Macau. That butterfly very high and graceful. When we see sword play from other eras and other parts of the world not connected to the Chinese martial artistry, we think of it as a kind of a brutal weapon, you know, a power weapon. But it's very much, when you see it displayed here, it's very much based on fluidity and grace, technique.
Well, the broadsword as a weapon is known for its slashing, big movements. We'll see different quality to the sword when we see the straight sword, or jian, often called the scholar's weapon in Chinese martial arts.
9号上场，4号准备。
They are a high caliber group here so far. You see immediately oversized sword.
We saw earlier this
This is an oversized, still single-handed broadsword, Tom?
he's actually using this linking bagua footwork. So.
It's beautiful. We talk about diversity and diversity of countries. We've seen diversity just from Italy themselves. So each country has diversity within their diverse nation.
Well, therein lies the festival nature of the competition. we saw our Group D, I believe, competitors earlier with the larger swords, two-handed broadswords. And now we have someone in Group C.
That festival nature, people who are martial artists or immersed in some way in the world of martial arts, they will find the World Kungfu Championships to be different. There's a joyousness here. People are competing, but they're also sharing.
And that it truly is a special quality about the World Kung Fu Championships.
We've seen some good Russian performances just in this group. And again, think back to the two Russians we've seen already today. Different forms and different types of expression between the three of them. That stance back, weighted heavily on that back leg and low.
It's called an empty stance or cat stance.
It is a beautiful, beautiful stance.
This young man was top competitor recently in the World Championships at Kazan.
Let's see if he keeps that flopping back and forth of new leaders going. American.
This form is the compulsory form that we mentioned we'll often see in the World Junior competition.
It must be exciting for a competitor like Lucas here from Argentina to be able to see these highly evolved forms and these highly evolved techniques and compete on the same carpet as them and do well in his own right.
He just realized he forgot a section of the form, shook his head, but as you said, great opportunity for him.
It would be great at any stage to, you know, win or place or beat your personal best, but growth and learning and evolving is the real goal. He will do that from this trip.
Mohammed from Tunisia.
Newer viewers of Chinese martial arts, the broadsword and the empty hand that we've seen, we can see a dance quality to these expressions. You know, you can feel that as a new viewer, and there is an element of that to fighting.
I think from the perspective, Robin, that the competitors show great dexterity and agility in terms of their footwork across the floor. We see the linking of the footwork.
martial artist. I've seen more side kicks through these broadsword displays than I have through any of the empty hand today. I'm not sure if that's a coincidence or it's the nature of these routines, but
in many of the, especially the traditional forms, you will see lots of push kicks, side kicks. You will see some jumping and spinning inside kicks as well. But the nature of the way the sword is moving also means that the techniques that you see coming out from the legs tend to be thrusting, slap kick.
As the sword is moving on angles or arcs or in circles, the thrust kicks make sense to sort of disrupt that. If your mind starts to follow that circular and arcing movement, put a thrust kick in there to interrupt.
Well, actually, as many of the techniques that you'll see, as a person slashes and strikes, the kick comes out to push the opponent. So it's often in the same direction, or if it's fighting another opponent behind you, you'll see a back kick every now and then.
As the distance that you get by having a weapon in your hand, a thrust kick would push somebody back into that space where they would be at the proper distance for your tool. So much logic, which makes sense as you reverse engineer it back to the why, you know, which would be part of, I think, as you learn about your weapon or you learn about your style, you learn about your form, you start to learn to understand why everything is, why and how they flow into each other. And that part of that learning and that curiosity must be very exciting.
As we've seen with some of the forms, they are structured in a way that allows the athlete to train techniques. Others have been designed or choreographed for a focus on difficulty factors in the form, sort of the explosive qualities that you'll see. This form is one of the optional forms, no doubt designed to highlight some of these competitors' strength movements, good wrapping.
His strength looks effortless like that. He's left the ground. We know that requires a lot of explosive power, speed, but it makes it look like it's just happening on its own. Part of the American team, which is a very large team. They have a hotel and a half. That landing spreads out so nicely through the impact through the long of the body. It's like a type of break fall while throwing that kick to that ground opponent.
Here's an example of the contrast from the traditional forms to the more contemporary.
That little extra tumbling and sizzle.
17号正好得分8.91分。
Right there. So that you would not see in the more traditional.
Not in that way, no. You'll see some ground fighting in the traditional, but the linking of this jump and then also ground fighting. Here, struggling with balance on the floor. Again, this is a huge stage for the competitors.
We've had conversations and you've shared experience and knowledge that I've found so interesting today, but among the most for me was the idea as we looked at different movements and mobility and stances throughout the Chinese martial arts, how they would have been designed to make sense in different terrain.
Yeah, he's forgotten his form. So what happens when you forget the form, you start trying to go through the movements again to try and figure out where he was.
The idea of almost thinking too much and not letting it flow.
Well, it's a huge stage. He's no doubt gone through his form many, many times, but not necessarily on this carpet. And one thing to practice on the floor in your training hall, it's another thing when you move on to the carpet and you have so much stimuli all around you, and you just sort of lose the focus.
Novel stimuli too. Focus and performance, just the active performance of any kind, is its own unique thing that is different in every environment. Every performance is a unique experience, no matter how many times you've done it. This looks very different than many of the ones we've seen as well.
A lot of much more traditional technique there. You saw the tornado kick, but you didn't see some of those other jumping and ground fighting techniques.
That anchoring of the sword in front of him as he moves forward was unique to him so far today.
Uriel from Colombia.
19号最后得分8.76分，20号上场，21号准备。
Martial artist from Taipei. No, it is not. That landing, as much as it is an attack of a down opponent, it has a break fall-like quality to the way that you distribute your weight when you hit that mat.
That's part of learning the technique, learning how to fall so you don't injure yourself. Iron broom technique.
It's very fun to watch.
So part of that technique. We didn't see it there. We may see it with some others, that the legs actually scissor and sweep. As you evade a technique, you also sweep the leg.
It is one of the, as we watch more and more Chinese martial arts, it's something I have noticed more in the Chinese arts than almost any that come to mind in a life of examining them, is the attack and defend simultaneously. There's so much of it in the Chinese martial arts. It makes so much sense.
Babenko from Kazakhstan.
In and around learning these forms and the non-stop practice, the amount of practice it takes to, search for perfection, knowing you'll never find it. As part of the growth with a weapon, are there times that a martial artist will just flow and try to improvise and innovate in space? Not here in competition, but in when they train?
Typically for the training routines, there's a reason that the routines are designed for the well-designed training routines. There's a reason that they are designed the way they are to help develop your skills, whether it's your foundations with a particular weapon. So you might see someone as they're trying to develop an optional form. Once you've reached a certain level of expertise, you will see sometimes forms where people have tried to improvise or create a form, and it's not so easy to do. And you'll see a well choreographed form and then a form that looks a bit awkward in the way it's executed on the floor. So there's something to say about the way routines have been designed so that they balance out footwork and hand techniques that help competitors develop their foundational skills.
That's kind of why I asked about that sort of state of play and that bit of exploration. I would assume only at quite a high level of competency would you be able to do that, but it really is a fascinating thing to get to know the movements and the weapon on that level.
You're right. Choreographed forms, there are people that specialize in designing forms. Just because you're an athlete doesn't mean that you understand how to, so it's sort of a business to finding people to choreograph forms for you. So similar to ice skaters or other people who have artistic expression as part of their form, there are people that have optional forms developed that they go to someone who specializes in martial arts technique and designing a form to ensure that the form has coherence.
And you use the example of other physical expression. You can take it even further. Great singers find songwriters to work with. That working together of creation and expression are sometimes separate things.
Here's a great example of that Bagua footwork with this sword that we've seen earlier.
Something just visually fascinating when you make the sword larger, the weight of it or the implied weight.
Well, as you've seen with the sword, footwork and body movement is a critical part of these large weapons, and it's fantastic to see the body coiling, moving, the continuous linking footwork, and the balance.
Yeah. at times almost the use of momentum and then having the strength to stop it still like that. That was beautiful. And he moves to second. He may be our last competitor of this division.
Yes, we've shifted to women's Nandao. This is Southern Broadsword.
So tell us the fundamental differences between the broadsword and the Southern Broadsword.
Well, you can see the shape of the broadsword is different. It still uses a slashing motion. What you will see is that the handle of the broadsword allows, even with this shorter broadsword, to show movement for two hands on the broadsword periodically, just like now.
And what would be the difference where one would be, say, a weapon artist, and somebody would specialize in one or the other? What would be the benefits of training both versus specializing only in one?
That's a great question, Robin. I wanted to share one other. In the hilt on this sword, you have two hooks, one going up and down, so you'll see the practitioner flip the sword using those hooks there. That's also characteristic of the Southern sword. Each one of the weapons, especially in Chinese martial arts, moves differently. The staff sort of is the king of the long weapons, moves in a certain way, but once you add the spear, you have another dimension of this long weapon. The Southern Broadsword is a type of broadsword, so you will find people that like this quality of like the Southern movement that you see in the sword, which is different, looks much more similar to what we saw in the Nanchuan, the way the footwork moves, and there are people who prefer that to the type of slashing and wrapping that you saw in the other broadsword, the Dao. Nan-Dao meaning Southern Dao, Southern sword. You will typically see people learn short and long range weapons and different types because of the variation in technique that you develop as a result of training in that weapon.
As a competitor and just as a martial artist, which do you prefer, or which have you preferred?
Well, my preference is actually to learn the characteristics of many of the weapons, because as a teacher, training as a teacher, you want an awareness so that you can create space for students to learn different things. Southern Broadsword, while it's been around, you didn't always see it as much as you see in competition. So it wasn't the first sword that I learned. Now we see the Southern Broadsword in competition so often, but usually when practitioners learned broadsword, they learned broadsword.
Pointed it out, you really can see the difference in the stances and the footwork, the overall movement, not just of the sword play, but of the play with the body as well. Short routines either. The amount of energy that you use in managing your body's energy, building more of it and managing what you have is part of the challenge. You can see here she looks like she's not fatigued, but you know that she is.
Yeah, it's a great deal of stamina involved in these forms. As I mentioned, many of the forms have, especially the more advanced forms, have 4 sections to the form for the optional routines.
It's a tax on the aerobic and the anaerobic system as you get into these longer forms. The anaerobic system for the short bursts of energy, and the aerobic challenge as you wear on throughout the minutes. 3, she moves into first.
With Amelia from Poland.
We'll have Idalia from Russia after that. A smaller group here, the 5 ladies. Group B, Southern Broadsword.
So here, likely with Amelia, while it's not the shape of the Southern Broadsword, her style, her footwork, and her handwork suggests that she is doing a broadsword form from a Southern style, which makes her form appropriate for Southern Broadsword.
Short and concise. So there is a minimum length that you do, and also a maximum. You probably saw the minimum right here and the maximum right before. It's enough for second for Amelia from Poland. Dalia from Russia will be our final. Group B, Southern Broadsword. Talking about the hook in the hilt, what are we watching for her to possibly do? One is down and the one is up.
She just used it to flip the sword.
And that hand on the non-bladed side is beautiful to watch too.
You see a lot more with the Nandao. You saw the tiger claw, which is characteristic of non-Tron styles.
So the very end, as she dropped down to that low stance. So she will take second of the 5. A great group. The Group B, Women's Southern Broadsword. We're already on.
Anas, yeah, Dair.
Men's Group B, Southern Broadsword. Saw the size of the broadsword groups, slightly smaller. Here.
Oh, we have Caleb actually from the USA, Caleb Young.
So this afternoon we have the broadsword, Southern Broadsword, long sword and the cudgeling staff. Tomorrow I noticed there are some other weapons, and I have seen around here some very interesting traditional and very unfamiliar weapons to a lot of people. At what age, and I know part of the answer is less about age and more about experience, but at what age would be the youngest you've seen somebody focus a child on weapons?
Well, it really depends on how the child progresses. There are some children that I have taught that within their first year of training, they can begin focusing on a weapon. Often I will start students training on staff as a weapon. It helps to build up some of their strength and coordination of a weapon, and as a long weapon, it really helps them to develop body awareness around this notion of using a weapon in your body, using a weapon in your body as you move through a routine. Typically, it's all a matter of how children develop their foundational skills. If you have trouble standing and have trouble with balance with bare hand, it's probably not a good idea to necessarily start on a weapon. So as you have kids who are able to develop coordination and balance with their bare hand techniques, when they have a good sense of their body and how their body moves through martial technique, they can begin to learn weapons.
I ask because here, this young man from Georgia, and I think we have one, maybe two more, are younger than the Group B, but because they're only a couple, they've been placed here in the group. He did very well. Alexander Emelianenko. Emelianenko, a great fighting name from Russia. That white border, Tony, I know in WUSHU, in the WUSHU World Championships in Taolu, to step or even have your toe outside that white line can be a penalty. But how is it viewed here? More of a guideline, or is it still?
There's still, even in most martial arts competitions, Robin, there is a boundary area. And so here it's still a boundary area. Obviously, when you have two competitors on the carpet, as we had earlier in bare hand, a difference was made in terms of the space. But now that we have individual competitors out, there's no doubt that there is still a penalty for competitors who don't stay within the boundary area of the competition area. We haven't seen much of a problem with that for these practitioners, especially when there's one person. It's a large competition area.
Here's our other younger than Group B, but given the chance to compete in Group B, Aspen Shen of the United States. Imagine there would be both an impression and probably a conversation or ongoing conversations about responsibility as a child would start to work with weapons. Part of learning that responsibility is part of martial arts.
Well, one of the things about Chinese martial arts, Robin, early on in most of your traditional schools are, and you will see them in various forms, whether they're the rules of the school or ethics that go along with training, so that the responsibility of learning martial technique as a child, where children are continuing to develop their own sense of right and wrong, and a lot of people appreciate that aspect of learning Chinese martial arts because it is an important element of helping the practitioner grow and develop, that when you start to learn these techniques, that you have the responsibility to use them in a way that you aren't hurting others. see good, fast movement and lots of hard work here with our competitor from Great Britain. Sometimes the momentum is getting ahead of him in terms of his balance and his footwork, but a very expressive form nonetheless.
Some of that will develop as, you know, the body's response to this amount of movement, the stabilizing muscles and the strength of the core. Some of it is physical development as well.
17号最后得分8.78，18号最后得分8.66，19号最后得分8.91。
A lot of times what happens in competition is there's the adrenaline rush of the big day, the big moment on the carpet. It can cause your feet to wobble a little bit. One of the differences that people often note for practitioners who have been training in traditional styles and foundation is that footwork is steady because it's part of what they've trained with all the time.
When you come to competition, you're hoping to get your very best, and asking that of yourself sometimes. You grip that steering wheel a little too tight. There are competitors with the swords. They have all performed alone on their carpet. And it would be beautiful at some point to be able to, and maybe from our booth we can blur our vision and watch on two carpets, but to see the Southern Broadsword and the Broadsword side by side. So it really is a noticeable difference to all of the movements, not just the sword. Strong finish from our 8th and final competitor. So he will finish in 3rd in the men's Group B, Southern Broadsword. Now we'll have the Group C. Although again, we've got a young man brought into Group C. WUSHU, Australia.
It's an example of training form. So the movements themselves are very repetitive. Just teaching the blocking technique, but there again, the sword.
Some changing of direction. American Anthony Diaz. the card. Large movements. Is there a variety of weights to the Southern Broadsword? Can you have a lighter one and a heavier one, and that will change how you use them?
There are lighter and heavier versions of the sword. Some of them you will hear the sound of the blade, and you can tell that the thickness of the blade is not the same, but Anthony's sword, because he's a taller guy, is a little bit longer, which is what you see for him.
2号最后得分8.66分。4号得分。
There's a lighter one. Saw Artem perform earlier today.
3号最后得分9.04。
Judges like
4号上场。
9.04.
8号准备。
It'll be a score to beat.
Here after that optional form is a more traditional broadsword form from Colombia, athlete from Colombia.
Fluid.
William Andrade.
Different camera perspectives let us see the fluidity as you saw from further out and now in close. Seeing it with the Southern Broadsword, we talked earlier about the Broadsword and some of the arcing circular movements and then the straight push kick and side kick. And here we saw straight movements and kind of the outside crescent kicks, so almost the opposite combination. Circular kicks and straight right here. Already out. We've got Muhammad. Oh no, Alex Tran.
Alex.
Position of the sword on that kick to the downed opponent above. The American team approves. And the judges do too. Over 9, just enough, 9:05. Another American. Aspect that we've been talking about the last couple of days of celebrating and looking at and sharing the diversity of the Chinese martial arts, that is for sure through day 2. If you look back at what we've seen and what they've shared, diversity is really the first thing that comes to mind. Seen many, or I don't know if any, left-handed sword play. If you are a left-handed person, do you still
learn your sword in the right hand?
You still do. That will definitely change what you're good at and how your body expresses it.
Well, for many people, if they haven't learned sword before, they're simply learning sword in their right hand. So
a stick there. Just to shake it off and continue.
So the kick that you just saw him show, or kicks that we saw in some of the traditional forms, again, this is an optional form where he's taken elements of Southern style that we could see in traditional movements and added them to his optional nan-dao.
They like it.
Omaru, no, Arden from Russia.
Yep. Powerful athlete. See the strength in his legs. Very alpha performance.
Well, the broadsword expresses, it's a very aggressive weapon. It expresses that chopping and slashing movement. You see it in nan-dao through the yelling. So it's a very expressive form.
Moves to the front with 9.17 with authority.
Shams or Rehman from Pakistan. Nope. Sri Lanka here. So some changes to our order.
This may be our last performer. A little bit more of a premium on grace than our last athlete. Maybe a little less expression of power. Although that landing is beautiful to watch.
Wikmara Yankin. Rama Yankin.
Performance. I don't know if the judges will see it like they saw Zagibilov.
Possibly a difference in the stances that he used versus some of our other competitors who showed a range of low and high stances. He is from Yemen, so we have a correction.
Hamdi.
Mansour Al-Yaresi.
So it was enough for fourth, so it was a very strong performance, but the Russian, Artem Zagibalov, is still in first. But we move now to the straight sword. Dominique, France, straight sword. Tony, tell us about the qualities of the straight sword.
Well, unlike the broadsword, the straight sword is a bladed weapon where it's sharp on both sides, so you won't see competitors pushing against the blade with one hand as they did before. This competitor doesn't have a tassel on his sword, but we will no doubt see competitors with tassels on their sword, which is typical.
Is it more of a thrusting weapon even?
Absolutely. You will see blocks and parries with the straight sword.
Saterang Dominique from France to open the straight sword. And you noted the difference in the footwork between the broadsword and southern broadsword. What should we look for here with the long sword?
Well, actually, now we're seeing some of the more traditional straight swords, but you'll still see the thrusting, parrying, and your you'll see flowers with the straight sword as well as you see now.
This is the Group B. Just an adjustment on that catch. A young martial artist.
Well, it's a Nandu technique, catching the sword, and he actually caught the tassel. Learning to master the tassel in your sword is an important aspect of training as well.
Bolivian martial artist here in Group B, straight sword.
This form that Matthew is showing is actually one of the compulsory straight sword routines that you'll see from youth. are the circular blocks that you'll see. You'll notice the opponents showing a great deal of the twisting, sitting stances in straight sword, balance movements, something you often see in straight sword.
And balancing your body to begin with is a challenge. Now we add the additional weight and length. Changes your center of gravity as you balance with that weapon.
Just as you saw in the broadsword, where the opposite hand is a palm, you often see in the straight sword, the opposite hand is 2 fingers for a second sword.
5号最后得分8.65分，6号上场，7号准备。
Matthew Chan, United States.
You'll see the straight sword with upward strikes using the tip of the sword.
From Italy. Mentioned the balance. All of these swords today, you see these moments where the artist will move from power to grace, sometimes both, still, and then fast movement. It's so diverse and complex.
A characteristic of the straight sword is that graceful movement.
There's that upward strike you mentioned, the tip. There's a float element to some of the straight sword where the footwork is more of a float.
6号最后得分8.74分，7号上场，8号准备。
With 4 remaining, just a second.
Leonardo from Bolivia.
The traditional garb. Is this a traditional form?
The movements look more aligned with some of the training routine forms. So.
41、42、43号上场。
Still moving, developing his grace. You can compare them. Oh.
You're absolutely right, Robin. He's still developing the fluency in his joints to move with the weapon. Still a little bit stiff in places where he needs to be more fluid.
Did let go of his weapon at one point. So a work in progress, like all martial artists. They're just at different stages of that progress. And a constant search for self-improvement. As we all are or should be. Young man here. Daniil, Kazakhstan. Playful nature to his form. are those movements, Tony? Those little playful steps. And
sometimes what you're seeing, Robin, are these, when you see the leg come up in the back, sometimes showing a low kick, but also that was training him to use his wrist and strike up. Wrist dexterity is very important in straight sword, and that's what you see, teaching him striking up, low stance striking back. What you'll see in the training forms, that repeated nature of the movement.
Very good performance by the young man there. States. Got a little chant of Alan in the background.
They're the same type of movement without the kick, but a cross step. Teaching balance on the leg there. Block and parry.
Talk a little bit about the mental state that they're in when they're in optimum performance. Time doesn't really, you lose a sense of time, and other things change in the way that you're sort of interacting with your environment.
Well, especially for our young competitors, they are simply moving through the routine, trying to navigate some of the difficulties of balance, whether it's on one leg or sitting. So for them, it probably feels like an eternity out there.
Sometimes as you're developing that ability to perform, that anxiety that it's going pretty well and there's only the last few things, you can feel that too. It's like, what you don't want to enter your mind is, don't mess it up, don't mess it up.
But for many of these competitors, as we discussed before, they have practiced these routines over and over and over again. The new dimension is being in this huge, beautiful, but very busy competition venue as we move to our female straight sword.
Some of the beauty for being in this moment is if you're expressing your performance, whatever that is, singing, painting, straight sword, you can lose track of everything. If there's a bill that you have to pay or an argument you got in with your friend, it doesn't exist at its best in this free moment of expression.
Well, there is a nature, an aspect of martial intention and focus. So you see that singular focus as the competitors execute their routines.
To be singularly focused, by definition, means to soften your focus on other things. So, a nice start from Sonia.
Here's our first example of Chanshuijian long tassel straight sword. So you see the tassel itself is used as a striking element, but it also has the difficulty of not stepping on the tassel or tangling the tassel in your movement.
It was a beautiful moment where she landed the tassel softly across her forearm.
Yes. This was one of my favorite straight sword routines to learn.
Beautiful. Yeah,
The movements are different. I didn't learn this specific form. This is an optional form often developed, but I remember, Robin, when I competed here, I saw a gentleman that must have been in his mid-70s at least, and he had a fantastic traditional long tassel straight sword form.
Very nice.
Here you often see the tassel being held before they begin.
And where that tassel ends up in these moments of freeze does not end there by accident. There it appears as a tail. There on her back.
So part of what you'll see for this competitor to continue to develop is this fluency in the waist. It's something that you'll often see in straight sword forms, both men and women, is that split in the form.
The connectivity of the waist.
The fluency. So that it doesn't look stilted at all. And especially as you look at the flow of the tassel.
5号准备。
You can see the training aspect of this form where it's not so much connecting other movements, but practicing technique. Stop, practicing the technique. Stop, practicing the technique. Practicing stances.
The technique, in practicing the technique, you get better at it and refine it, but also those tiny adjustments get made in your body itself by repetition.
And just as we've seen other, what we call non-duo difficulties, you see how difficult it is just to do a simple balance movement.
And when we do break it down to this type of training form, you can see, you can imagine it, watching at home, from that balance to that step back, just something as simple as that. Picture trying to do that in your kitchen, and you know that it would take a ton of practice just to be able to do it. And you know, just that little...
This stance is a classic straight sword stance, but she demonstrated the challenge as you are learning.
Four号最后得分8.64分。5号上场，6号、7号准备。
It's nice to be able to get that visual slowdown of seeing these training forms. Lets you contextualize just how hard some of the advanced ones.
Looks like somehow we have a Tai Chi gym here in the competition. Not sure.
If it is a small enough group of people that
Maybe not. Just those
elements.
movements, not Tai Chi gym.
showing her diversity.
Actually, not a Tai Chi form.
center.
Beautiful transition to very difficult sitting stance.
Both those slow, strong, fluid movements. To show no expression on your face of how much work that is, that alone is something to appreciate.
You can see the relaxed power.
9.05分，7号上场，当
And
管
the
准
judges
备。
saw it too, 9:05 for first place so far. I believe the young lady from Pakistan. No?
Simona Pilatova. Slovakia.
Connection between the sword and the changing of stances. It's very interesting to see. Balances with the test here.
It's a traditional training form. The sword itself now teaching her the circular movement. We've seen that position twisting and now a balance movement.
Nice. Balance seems to be the challenge throughout here with these training forms, trying to teach that balance.
7号上场。
Especially for some of our teenage competitors as they adjust to lots of challenges with strength.
7号中国得分8.65分。
She shows great flexibility.
52号最后得分8.78。14号准
We
备
have Elena from Russia, showing straight sword.
I love that wide shot as a variety. You can watch them move, big picture movement. The beauty and the kind of eternal curiosity that you can have about movement or martial arts. Sometimes it's very small. You're looking at something tiny. The position of the toe there, or how her hand is gripping that sword. And other times you blur your vision and it's very, very wide, very big view as you watch the entire body move across the carpet. Sometimes it's the micro, and sometimes it's the
8
macro.
号最后得分8.96分。
8.96.
12号准备。
So another Russian, Anna, is in first with 9:05, and Alina moves to second currently.
Wanda from Bolivia. No, Sonia Purdue
Italy.
from Italy. Did we miss Wanda? Looks like a few competitors.
it's easy to, when you watch the fluid, near-perfect performances, they make it look easy. And sometimes when you see the developing martial artists, only then do you appreciate just how challenging it is to have this type of control, not only of your body, but of a weapon.
Absolutely, Robin. And that's the great thing about competitors being here, to see the other athletes.
11号最后得分8.78分，12号上场，13号准备。
Yuri Mori of Japan.
3号、59号、60号上场，55号最后得分8.6。
Very flowy early here.
56号最后得分8.82，57号最后得分8.79。
Here's an example where you look for the wrist movement, the speed in the wrist. You'll see a big difference between some of the competitors that have more experienced straight sword routines. We've seen that same stance, but here you see room for development with Mori.
And that is where we, the viewer, see how challenging it is. You start to be able to imagine the challenge of holding your body in position like that.
Well, here's an example of where hopefully Mori's teacher will help her with some of the foundational elements so that once you put it together in a form, the balance connections, the extension of the body, and even the thrusting have a different. We talk about accuracy, fluency, speed, and power in Chinese martial arts. Accuracy being the foundation before you begin to add any type of power, speed, and then lastly power coming from it.
So I've watched and observed and had exposure to some Chinese martial arts training. There are some schools of thought that talk about moving slowly at first and then picking up speed. Is that an aspect of learning to develop power? Slow expression and slowly adding power to it?
Well, the idea that if your technique is not accurate, you won't develop maximal power. So, there are some styles like your internal styles that are helping you coordinate breathing and balance and slowly movement. But usually, before you move on to speed, you're ensuring that you are working on accuracy and then fluency, how you connect the movement smoothly.
Sometimes that we can use to Melissa Yaya 865. We can use sometimes that's easy for people to imagine is when they train that just a simple golf swing. Imagine training that in 65 different ways and moves and movements and connecting them all. It's such a challenge. It's like the straight sword. This morning we had some D group men with the broadsword, and we have some D group with the straight sword as well today. D, some of as old as late 60s and 70s we've seen. Some of those gentlemen have been working with their art or their weapon for much of their lives. You see incredible proficiency. 18 competitors in the men's C group straight sword. Martin here is the first.
1号最后得分8.72分，2号上场，3号准备。
Dmitry Minin, Russia. Fast and explosive. You used the word extension a few times. You see that here, Dmitry. There. A little more advanced balance. Broadsword is done smoothly. It really is beautiful.
Here, the straight sword.
The straight sword, yes.
Yes, it is. And you just described what a lot of people think about the straight sword when they describe it. The precision and the fluency and the balance of the routine look really beautiful when well done. It's quite captivating. In the same way, Broadsword has its own
2号最后
quality.
得分9.09分，3号上场，4号准备。
That was a beautiful performance.
64
9.09.
66
For Simone here from Italy, she doesn't want to be influenced by what he saw. Just do what he
61
does.
号最后得分8.62。62号最后得分8.46。63号最后得分8.70。
Is this a training form?
Now, I'm wondering if it's similar to what we saw earlier, because the movements have the flow of a Tai Chi form, but I'm sure that we shouldn't have Tai Chi Jin now.
Unless there are so few competitors.
Yes, it's possible that they've moved him to the division. Typically, Tai Chi Jin is not such a small category, though. But it may be for this age grouping. Must be, I think we might have heard a whistle. Usually they use the whistle to help with the time parameters for Tai Chi, to let the athletes know where they are before they have to finish their form. The unusual thing is that Tai Chi Jin is one of the forms where we will have multiple competitors, so you may be quite right, Robin, that we can see another Tai Chi Jin competitor on the floor.
And again, for Simone, he can't concern himself with that. Just do what he's trained to do. That's what he does. It's like soft music. And immediately you see the difference.
Alex from the Netherlands.
somebody watching, Tony, how does one train to not become dizzy with circular movement? Is that just repetition, or can you train that quality?
It's repetition, but it's also your focus. Focus helps you keep that equilibrium. But as you see the form executed, you should see the athlete focused on a competitor in front of them.
See his gaze look up at times here as his weapon goes up. Yeah, you see his head turn as if to look towards.
5号上场，6号准备。
We have a drunken straight sword form now.
For those of you watching at home, don't play with the sword when you're drunk.
Arching from the Ukraine.
It really is an incredible expression of combat, the drunken style. You add the sword to it. For some of these athletes that we've seen express the drunken style, would that be only one aspect of their wushu training?
Sure. Of course, you have athletes who are exceptional. It fits their physicality and their expressive quality best, and so they often will perform that in exhibitions. But usually, it's just one aspect of their training.
But like anything, somebody could, that is really cool. Somebody could fall in love with it and become hyper specialized in that area. And then he shook it off and sobered up at the end. Right through. Artem 8.95 for second so far. We do have 19 competitors, so through 5. I have noticed throughout 2 days here with you that I have seen quite a number of practitioners from Bolivia.
Well, this truly is an incredible gathering of Chinese martial artists from across the world.
He didn't stick that one, but that was because he continued on until that stance.
He will have an opportunity to grow in his body work for straight sword. It looks like we have another drunken straight sword from Japan.
You can get really hypnotized into those movements. really so beautiful to watch, and you know the amount of work that it takes to make it look effortless and drunken. And to the uninformed eye, I think it's one of the most entertaining for somebody who hasn't seen a lot of Chinese martial arts before. Have you trained some of the drunken style? Have you trained aspects of it?
Sure, some of the basics.
Is it as fun to do as it's fun to watch?
It's tremendous fun, Rob. Difficult, but tremendous fun.
Sydney from Australia.
It's USA, I think.
Oh, yes, United States, indeed. So within one of these forms with the straight sword is, if you were doing it in competition, is a balance component mandatory?
Typically in straight sword, you will see a balance component.
One leg.
It would have to be a very elementary straight sword to not see balance, but even in what we consider the youth compulsory straight sword form, there is a balance element. I'm sure there was a balance element here. And this is fairly elementary straight sword form, a solid straight sword form.
And of course,
so it has balance element there as well.
The attribute of balance is always out play, but that little stationary holding a balanced pose, I've seen it in most of them.
Here we have two-handed straight sword.
To the eye, there's an implied weight. But how heavy is this two-handed sword? If somebody watching at home were to pick it up, would they be shocked at its weight?
Probably. I mean, the fact that the sword is oversized. There are, as you asked earlier, there are very heavy. There's a very heavy version of some of the weapons that people use for training. This is not one. But it's not the lightest one either. This looks like a straight sword we call Longchuan Dragon. Well, so it's the professional quality straight sword as opposed to some of the thinner weight swords that we see in here.
Are these weapons inspected by an official? Do you have to have
in certain competitions? They probably were inspected prior to bringing the athletes out in the warm-up area where they order the athletes and ensure that the numbers are matching with the athlete that's registered. They will check the weapons also because of a safety component of the competition.
You mentioned the area where they are lined up and make sure their numbers and so forth, the weapons inspected. There is so much behind the scenes that the audience and our viewers don't see. And the better that work is done, the less you see that work exists.
At a competition like this, where it's really important to have some of those systems in place, we can all appreciate the effort that it takes to coordinate a form with a competition with 6 different carpets.
Just the volunteers alone, and they have been great. Here in Emeishan. I can't stop talking about to my friends and the people that I've met here about just how beautiful this city and this region is. This is my first time in China, and it is an incredible country. Fascinating people.
This is your first time you've come to a very special place.
One of the biggest cities nearby, Chengdu. You've spent a lot of time there, Tony.
Yes, I have. It's one of my favorite cities.
11号最后得分8.75分。
Good showing from Gabriel Almeida.
13号准备。
We have
Plaza, Mexico.
4号、5号、6号上场。
And it's very interesting to see not only do some of the competitors wear the traditional clothing from temple or from monks, they also will style their hair in the same way. That's what we see here with Lionel Pedraza. I have friends over a couple of decades who have become lifelong learners of Shaolin style in Mexico. So there's
As one studies the martial arts style, you can't help but be influenced by some of the philosophical things that you learn, self-examination, and in doing so, you'll develop an affinity to other aspects of the culture.
I can say that is something that I've observed with a number of martial arts practitioners as well.
We have 3,000 competitors here at the World Kungfu Championships. It just crossed my mind. I wonder what the population of swords in this building is. It's rare that there are as many swords in any building as there are here today.
13号上场，14号准备。
Starts off with a very acrobatic expression early. Continues. He is not. There's not one area of the carpet that that Edgar wants to leave untouched. See by looking, there's a lot of these acrobatic and flashy elements. How's his basic fundamentals behind it, Tony?
It's a solid form. Allowed him to transition into some of the Namdu, some of the difficulties, but as you mentioned, there was a lot of covering the carpet.
7号、8号、9号上场。
Transition into some of the Nandu, which is more of a focus in this form than some of the other straight sword elements.
8.84。15号准备。
Keep moving. Fusida. From that loud Italian team. Vociferous. Enthusiastic, maybe would be a good word.
And a difference in the form here where there's much more of a focus on the sword play. And not a focus on the difficulty or those acrobatic elements.
Just in case any of the Italian supporters and fans and teams still have some voice, we will have another Italian, Doriano, coming out right after. Very nice. As you mentioned, that focus on the sword play. Really.
What position was he?
Second.
Second place.
Nothing to hide behind when you're showing these, you know, without all the extras.
Focus was on the sword play.
Yeah. The second Italian, the third really in this group. Simone earlier. Zeda moved to second place. With his clean and crisp form. Let's see what they think of Doriano Idosini.
The level of the form was not quite where his compatriot from Italy was, but you could see a commitment to really capturing the essence of the straight sword in his form. It's great effort on his part. Still has an element of his body work that, to develop.
18号12号换手，7号最后得分8.59，8号最后得分8.82，9号最后得分8.84。
It's very active sword form.
That flowering. It decelerates to those frozen, balanced positions very well. I think they'll like that.
16号最后得分8.83，18号上场，19号准备。
Very good. Big field here in the Group C straight sword. On the Yokomin.
Here you can watch his body movement and see the difference in the straight sword. Sort of twisting at the waist and the fluency of his hands.
Yeah, it is really, you see the way the upper and the lower body are connected with strength, but also with mobility.
if the form continues in this way, I would not be surprised to see some movement into perhaps top 3.
Let's see, that was beautiful. Be waiting, anticipating. He will know that he had a great performance. But how good? Pretty great. You call top 3 with 1 competitor remaining. Dmitrio from the Ukraine.
13、14、15号上场。10号最后得分8.69，11号最后得分8.68，12号最后得分8.74。
See more expression in his head than in some. Maybe that's the off the shoulder that allows my eye to see it.
Well, it's very clean, straight sword technique. Doesn't have the same fluency, but not every straight sword form moves the same way, but he has very clean thrusting, parrying, and circular movement. And Robin, his uniform is cool.
Yes, it is. You rocked one of those at the 6th World Kungfu Championships, didn't you?
No.
Very nice. Be hoping for a top 5. He just hits number 5. So a strong finish from the Ukraine and Hong Kong, and we will move on now. Some more straight sword from our senior men, International Men's Group D. And we saw some phenomenal, beautiful martial expression with the swords this morning as we wound down into our Group D. And I don't want to jinx it, but I'm excited to see these men. The idea that somebody has handled a weapon for 40 and 50 years, you see it a different way that it connects to them, and they connect to it. But we talked about it this morning. What is so beautiful about the festival that is the World Kung Fu Championships? You could also see a man in the same group who's had the sword for 4 or 5 years.
Sure.
It is also an incredible thing, as you think, as somebody who's done martial arts for many decades, you'll do it for many more of your life. But somebody else at 60 could take up martial arts, and it'd have a huge influence on the rest of their life.
Mikhail, and I am enjoying these two-handed straight sword routines.
Yeah, me too.
You don't see these in other competitions. They have to go into a special category. But here, they're appropriately categorized with the straight swords. But you see that they've grouped them together.
Giovanni from Bolivia. they ask us for sort of a performance of the day or a standout of the day, and I want to say that the two-handed sword itself is my player of the day. We've had so many different performances from men and women, young and particularly the seniors, with the two-handed weapon, that it is the sword itself that I'm appreciating today. Giovanni from Bolivia continues.
I think we saw a competitor from Italy with a great straight sword also. It's so nice to see the smile and this exuberance.
4号上场，5号准备。
Another two-handed straight sword. You can see the flow that this gentleman has. I have seen more of the two-handed sword with the senior men than other today.
Dmitry from Russia. There are children, I'm sure of that. When I learned two-handed straight sword, my practice partner was a kid.
Great performance with the two-handed straight sword.
From Australia.
With the thrusts up high with the point, attacking with the point, could that be an enemy on horseback? That type of scenario?
Not so much. See if they show us a replay. But usually when the sword is coming over, it's in a continuous motion, so it's not staying. Parrying techniques up, striking down. And that was a part of the function of his jumping. Next gentleman and I were teammates together on the U.S. On the traditional team years ago.
Brandon Sujiyama. Brandon, I take it, has been handling the straight sword for many years.
It's a great performance by Brandon Sugiyama of the USA.
I would have not anticipated coming in, but it's completely logical now in retrospect, just how good some of the seniors could be. Yeah, you physically change as you get older, but you add years on years, skill on top of skill, and you just develop this proficiency. And, you know, we talked about seeing different competitors of your art or your weapon, but you can also look at what you can strive for, not just in your skill, but in growth as a human being, as you see some of these seniors. If you're a 20-year-old martial artist, you look at some of these men and women and can picture where you could be if you continue your practice.
We have Henry Eleanor from the Netherlands, possibly.
21号最后得分8.88。
Eleonora.
3号最后得分8.83。
Circular.
7号最后得分8.88分。
Good performance. 8.88 for second. The question he has now is, will he finish in second or third as Zhang Yaping of China? Look at this. Little pauses between movements, so wow. That was fantastic. His uniform is beautiful as well.
It adds to the aesthetic.
And the drama.
But the form spoke for itself.
8号
It's just the seniors, if you can see the level that one can reach, 915. He will take the men's group, and deservedly so.
2号准备。
We will see in women's group B, straight sword. Already are underway.
请所有获得1等奖的运动员马上到境内颁奖处检录。
Lynn, United
请
States.
所有获得1等奖的运动员马上到境内颁奖处检录。
24号最后得分8.64。 25号最后得分8.57。 26号最后得分
So we see where she has room to develop in terms of stability in the stances. She's making the stances. Great flexibility extension.
I feel like when we're looking for, if she's studying herself for places to keep growing, there are moments where it feels like one move and then the next and then the next. And for that to disappear must just take time and training.
Part of that, Robin, is the nature of the form. This is a training form, so it doesn't have the same built-in fluency that you sometimes see in some of the more advanced forms.
But you see what her strengths are.
That's an optional movement added in.
Group B, so still young. Even at their best at this level, when you compare it to what we saw from the senior men, it would
Sure,
be...
you can look at the movement of the feet to see where that balance point is and how a person can move into developing in the balance point.
Another American in the straight sword, Group B.
So you see a different balance point. Still a little bit of struggle with that scale, we call it.
Both of them, you see the things that they excel at as they try to put the whole thing together.
This is a much more experienced straight sword.
Maybe, since we brought it up, if we're watching at home, let's focus in over the next few ladies just on the feet themselves. As you watch with your eyes, where you apply your focus as a viewer changes your experience too. So if we watch their feet, we'll be able to compare. Another American teammate. There are 5 young women in this division. Group. Ataya, let's watch her feet.
27号最后得分8.75 28号最后得分8.84 29号最后得分8.80
Deliberate with her steps, confident with her steps, but still developing with a distribution of weight is such a subtle, tactile thing.
You'll notice where she puts the sword is different as opposed to just drawing the sword up from the top. So she will develop into learning how to use the sword hand differently. The fluency of the wrist when she moves it will look different. Right now, there's a dragging quality of form, but as she develops, as she increases her awareness of those details, it'll make a difference.
Some little technical adaptations over time.
That's a little bit of individual panache there.
Laura Pinedo, Bolivian girl. There was a wee little fella named Mr. Pinedo the other day. I wonder if they are related. He was 4 years old and did this beautiful little form.
8点之一。
Here's where you see this quality with the young children learning fluency. Straight sword's not an easy weapon.
4号最后得分8.31分。上场6号准备。
Sing Yi from Malaysia.
Some of these thrusts are very committed. You see the extension and the penetration on these thrusts. Malaysian lady waiting for her score.
5号最后得分8.47分。上场6号上场，7号准备。
Almost halfway, going on halfway through. She's super nice. Li Ziyan.
This is one of the training forms, basic straight sword forms. I often teach children. First straight sword form. This is also the form that small children perform at the youth and World Junior Championships.
You can see that as a foundational form, it's building some of the foundational puzzle pieces.
That was why it was designed.
Stance.
6号最后得分8.70分。7号上场，8号
She's
准
happy.
备。
She should be. So in first so far. Still quite a few competitors to follow. We have, you see the big picture. Caitlin Tran, American. Adjustment there on the landing. As we get a little later in the afternoon, early evening, there's even more people coming in to take in martial artistry. Even early in the morning, the arena here has been full. Sichuan International Tourism Trade Expo Center. It is a beautiful facility.
It's a great facility.
You won't see it, but right above our carpet and the carpet to our left, there is natural lighting that comes in from above.
7号正好得分8.61分，8号上场
Performance from Caitlin Tran. I believe we'll have another American teammate next. Eileen Membrano. Part of that big American team.
A little bit of loss of concentration there and loss in the form. She's not sure where she is in the form.
Thinking a little too much.
Trying to get back to but great credit to her for finishing out the form.
Stumble and concentration. Not everyone did, and they saw her hard work, and she's in fourth so far. Emeishan. As we compare the different groups, you know, there's really a very strong metaphor for growth and evolution. And, you know, here, when they're young, what we're seeing is potential, what they can be and what they can grow into.
Sure.
And with our senior groups, you see what's possible with a lifetime. It's very, very interesting when you point out the training forms. You can see the training pieces within it. You see the why of those forms very clearly.
It's a difference in the choreography of those forms and some of the other forms that you see. Here again is a training form.
请所有获得1等奖的运动员马上到境内颁奖处点入。 请所有获得1等奖的运动员马上到境内颁奖处点入。
That's training that stance, and one part is training the balance and sticking the landing. The repetition of the thrust is training the thrust. It's very clear the why of these forms. And that repetition over and over for somebody to train these, you get lost in the repetition in the best way possible.
Here you see where they've taken the training form and added dimensions. We saw another practitioner from Turkey the similar aerial at the end of the form to close the form.
There's a particular bit of logic there, it feels like. Oh, nice. She moves to first. You see, she can't hide that she's happy, and she shouldn't either. You can see a logic in it as a teacher of children. Give them a training form and have them start to develop some mastery in it, and then add a piece or add something. You see that thought process, whether it's the preferred one or not. You see why a coach may do it.
Well, oftentimes the training forms are not suited to competition, so you'll have people add dimensions to the training form, because if you notice, many of those forms are linear forms that just go back and forth and may not have this element of excitement or performance. So what will happen, because an aerial is not a basic technique, it's not it may be basic in terms of difficulty movements, but it's not consistent with training basics in a straight sword form. So when you see things like that added later in the form, they're to add to this sort of performance quality. Is this Aaron from Republic of South Africa?
I believe so. South Africans have really shown well for themselves. Shripani.
Sopan Katke of India.
When we called the World WUSHU Championships together, called the Sanda, I was so impressed and enjoyed the combat performances of the Indian team.
Sure.
Their skill was high, but there was a ferocity to the way they competed.
It's great to see that development of WUSHU around the world.
She waits for her score. Our final competitor from Estonia, we will see shortly, will already have begun her form. And when the camera moves, there you see her. And yet, of course,
Attention please. Who lost the number? 1656.
very fluid.
Please come to announce please.
Small stumble there, balance.
Attention please. Who lost the numbers? 1651. Please come to announce please.
Just like to watch when you see somebody performing and they have a little stumble. Subconsciously, you kind of cheer for them to refocus, and because there's something in that. You know, there's a life lesson in that you can see. It's human to stumble, to have a small setback. How you react to it is what you train and what is within your control. I think she did very well at that there. From that point on, she regained her focus. As you study the martial arts, it has many lessons for life. It is a metaphor for life itself. And we will move now to cudgel the staff. Our producer Paul was rather excited to see the cudgel. Group A, the youngest men, Lucas Hong from Brazil.
They are performing the youth compulsory form that kids their age would show. One of them is, the other is showing a different form.
It is really a one-of-a-kind competition and festival where within the same hour you can see a man who has studied martial arts his entire life perform with a sword, and less than an hour later see two young men with staffs being cheered on by their countrymen. Now our rundown of these young men, I think, has changed during the day. They might both be two Brazilians. Is it Lucas Hong from Brazil?
And you're correct. The other young man has a Brazilian flag. So our
Dylan? Yes, Dylan from Brazil. They come out and their team cheers them on.
1624.
Lucas Dong, United States.
Lucas is performing one of the compulsory forms.
Sticks it. Talked about seeing what potential and what they can become. This little man is very impressive already.
Jamie from the Republic of South Africa.
Lucas is a dynamic little man.
The form that he's performing is actually an adult compulsory form.
Can you imagine that when you were watching and competing and teaching, say 20 years ago, that a child of not even 7 or 8 would be doing an adult form at this level?
Yeah, it's an important development for training youth. They may not always understand the nature of the movement that they are performing, but they can follow and imitate.
On some level, their body itself understands even before they understand. That woke up this room. I'm frightened that anybody could beat that in our remaining group.
Well, we have some extremely talented martial artists here today.
No surprise there so far. Jamie from the Republic of South Africa did very well as well. easy to focus when there's two on the carpet. Easy to end up focusing on one, especially when they're dynamic. I didn't see his name. Is this Maxime from Latvia? He's got the Latvian colors. Papa.
Looks like we have a little bit of drunken staff there.
They shouldn't let this child drink or play with the staff for that matter.
Popa Daniel from Romania.
Good control of his weapon. As he appears to lose control of himself. Of course, it is by design. You wonder how young athletes can get so smooth at something, whether it's anything they focus on, but if they have a state of play and enjoyment and fun, and ultimately martial arts are supposed to be fun.
Actually, you hear the phrase often, play wushu, in Chinese.
Popa again moves to second.
Choka from Republic of South Africa, I believe.
And on the other side, Karel Karek, Czech Republic.
16、17、18号赛，13号最后得分8.88，14号最后得分8.77，15号最后得分8.10。
That was a fun group as we finish with these two. They certainly played wushu for us. We already move into the women's group B. See the first two on the carpet. International Women's Group B. The staff.
Kushi Telkar from India and Triza Regina
Kazakhstan.
from Kazakhstan.
Group B, loosely phrased, are teenagers. Nice start.
Ivanova from the Ukraine and
Belfarin with her. Our viewers will notice as we see the scores, you may hear the sound of the staff coming in contact with the carpet. That's because the next two are already beginning. We talked about sharing a carpet when you're showing your forms, and there's staff waving around. You have to be even more aware of the space between you.
16号最后得分8.72。17号最后得分8.67。18号最后得分。
I suspect for the adults, maybe they will not share a carpet, or will they, Tony? The adults with the staff.
I doubt if they will have the adults share the carpet.
I think so. Here, these forms are a little more linear.
You see the assistant chief judge out there probably ensuring safety as well. Yes, they've had them move the competitors farther away from each other.
3号最后得分8.50， 4号最后得分。请所有获得一等奖的运动员马上到境内颁奖处检录。请所有获得一等奖的运动员马上到境内颁奖处检录。
Two young ladies from Turkey, I believe. Zeynep Akuz. Her partner on the carpet is from Kazakhstan. Is there an importance to that sound in judging?
Well, when you smash, you should hear the sound when the carpet generating the power into the staff. You notice if you see someone smash the carpet, but they don't smash, and execute power sufficiently.
Scores. Let's listen for the sound of the staff hitting the carpet. Well, Mr. First. Lucy from the Republic of South Africa. American. It's loud in here. I don't know if you hear it at home, but across multiple carpets there are teams and supporters cheering competitors on.
Attention please. Attention please. Music should be given in units to the sound and hearing before the end of the afternoon competition on November 10th. 8号最后得分8.44，9号最后得分8.45，10号、11号上场。
Good showing from the two of them. We will have our last two from this division. Diana of Kazakhstan.
And Cipriani from Italy.
Strong performance here to start. Diana. A lot of confidence in her movements from Kusmanova Diana.
13号最后得分8.77。女子 C 组其他配置系组2号、3号、4号上场。
10号最后得分8.49，11号最后得分8.42。男子 B 组部署，1号、2号上场
We will
，3号、4
begin
号准备。
the second last group of the day. A large group, Group B, men's Group B. 22 competitors. Yeah, it is 2 at a time, so we will keep an eye on their positioning and spacing. The relationship between each other in space. The Canadian and the American share the carpet. Andrew from my country of Canada, from Tony's country, United States, Tim Zhang. We are unbiased. However, I'm secretly cheering for the Canadian, Tony.
请裁判员退场。
I think that's perfectly acceptable, Robin.
Not for
If you-
judges, let's make that clear. But for people talking and trying to do our best to enrich the experience, subtle human bias is acceptable. That must be something discussed a lot and talked about and focused on, the unbiased, the need for unbiasedness in the judges themselves. How do you, I've seen at different times throughout the World WUSHU Championships where judges from countries where their people were competing, just to make it easy for them, they were swapped out. Is that common?
Yes, it is common to ensure the appearance of objectivity, or to ensure objectivity in the judging. But typically what happens is because you have more than one judge, you have judges scoring multiple aspects of the competition. You also have someone reviewing in Internet World Championships. You have someone reviewing the judging to ensure that there's impartial judging. So
Well, Tony, for the record, the Canadian, in this case, came out on top.
5号、6号、7号站岗。
Jacob Mertaski. This young man from
2
Romania,
号最后得分。
drunkenly moving across the carpet.
3号最后得分8.6分。4号最后得分8.7分。
Focused young man. Mertaski bumps the Canadian out. At least temporarily moves into first. Still a lot to go here in men's Group B. 22 in total. Coming Lee Khan.
From the Republic of South Africa, with a large cheering delegation over there. And Aaron Jinyi from Brunei.
Two little white areas on his staff. Is that just for the eye? Yeah.
Tape to let him know where his hand should be positioned on the staff. You often see this. You saw it on the other kid's staff, Dong. I think it was just fluorescent tape. But
for the sensitivity for him to be aware of where he should be. Could add
it's a little resource that helps him to know where he should position his hands. Also, for many of the athletes, trying to grip the staff becomes challenging at times. Helps with absorbing perspiration for them.
For the Portos.
These staffs are made of waxwood, so the staffs are flexible. Sometimes they become brittle after a while.
5号最后得分8.71。
Firas from Tunisia.
Yep.
6号最后得分8.7。
Yesterday.
7号最后得分
They take it, the staff goes in the oversized baggage when you ship it.
女子弟子其他配置系统1号、2号、3号上场。
For us, a very fluid mover. Saw that in his performance yesterday. Moves to sixth, and we'll see Firas' score right now. Moves to first. It looked sharp, precise. He did well in both these competitive divisions that we've seen so far. Still a lot of competitors here. Emeishan Tang.
Showing us what looks like traditional Southern form.
Appears to be out here by himself. He's scheduled to be out with a young Brazilian, but maybe the nature of their forms, or maybe there was a miscue, as we see Gabriel of Brazil still standing off the carpet. This Tang is doing a great job here. And yes, as he comes off to get his score, Gabriel, the young Brazilian, with the staff, takes the carpet. So moves to third, does Tang. Yes. Gabriel Ferreira. You can see the distancing that the staff can use as a weapon. When gripped at the end like that, it triples or even quadruples or quintuples the reach of the human arm.
Gabriel moves into second place.
I've always found some of the traditional weapons that are taken from household objects or farming utensils to be fascinating. No more basic utensil than a wooden rod. To develop it into such a beautiful weapon is elegant. It is like a festival atmosphere. It's like a celebration, even before they complete their forms. It's as if they're celebrating just their ability to express themselves. Heinemann, United States. And it's Group B staff. You don't have to have ever held a staff to watch that and think about how difficult that is when you first pick that up and try to do that with your wrists. Nicely done. We'll have a group of Americans now, Trevor being the first of three that we will see.
7号、8号、11号。
Angela Gould, second of 3 Americans, first through. You mentioned some places where you will train, your training environment, you may not have this kind of space. One suspects that he does, as he looks super comfortable moving from corner to corner, awareness-wise.
Sure, in the U.S., many of the competitions now have the training carpet. So the athletes practice for that environment in the training venue.
Didn't come in here during practice day, the day prior to day 1 of the championships, and there were a lot of people on these mats taking their turn to practice, and in some cases you could really see that it would be the first time stringing together the components of their form, or if not the first time, an early time. Imagine the development of these styles and these forms at some point, seeing the staff fly from your hands as you spin it. Something as you're developing, I'm sure, deal with.
It happens. We've had a couple of people miss grabbing the staff. The other thing that you'll see sometimes is you'll see the staff crack or break.
You saw in that corner how it is slightly darker now. It is that overhead light that we have starting to become night here. Low and powerful. That was a nice performance. I'm curious how they'll see it. They liked it. Moves to 4th. That sound you hear, if you hear it, is our next competitor. Layden Adams, already on the carpet.
Republic of South Africa.
I know they don't give medals for volume of support, but Republic of South Africa would be in the running with Italy. Competitors in this division will pay you time. Starts bare-handed, picks up his weapon.
You see the execution of the power at the end of the staff as it shakes.
Little body generates a lot of power, and that is, as you can see, just clean technique. power is not something you have. When people talk about athletics, or especially combat, sometimes they say this man or woman has great power. Power isn't something you have, it's something you create. You see that right here. Ooh, Mr. Tan. Our descriptions of martial arts sometimes in mainstream sport, we couldn't be more incorrect in the way we say things. Knockout power in both hands. He has knockout. There's no power in hands. And he doesn't have power. Create power. This little man creates a ton of power.
Should have a great score.
17号最后得分8.60分。18号上
He
场。
does. The greatest score so far in this men's Group B. And I believe, and just from looking at him anecdotally, that he is actually Group A. He's been brought into Group B. Could be wrong. Another talented young man. Fourth. Young Jeffrey Chung here. So in this men's Group B, some very young competitors as we near the end of the group. Strong competitors. Talked about some of the organizational things. Just organizing 3,000 or up to 3,000 competitors into groups and categorizing them, that is a huge undertaking alone.
Sure, and some divisions are naturally longer than others, and typically your big divisions will be Tai Chi, Tai Chi Gen, Broadsword, Straight Sword, Staff.
He moves to second. The Egyptian fella here.
Mustafa Abdelali.
Oh, no, a German, Jean. He's an Egyptian competitor. He's not here. Jean-Michel Martin.
It's monkey stuff.
Yeah. Right down to picking the louse. showman nature is very obvious. If somebody just turned on their set or computer or however they were interfacing with this, they would know what that little character was playing. You wouldn't need much explanation. You might ask why, but you certainly wouldn't be confused as to what he is portraying.
This weapon has quite a bit of showmanship quality. This form, quite a bit of showmanship quality, but it also involves a lot of difficulty. So as he continues to develop this form, you'll see the quality of the movement improve.
Final competitor in Group B, Sri Lanka. As he waits for his score, men's Group C, which will be our final group, 22 competitors. First will already be taking the carpet as one round goes well.
Basti Muhammad from Algeria.
So as we talked about watching the seniors and seeing what one could grow into, and the young competitors and seeing what kind of potential they have. These could be, some of them, men in their athletic primes, if not their martial primes. Look behind the competitors, you see the guys coming up next, limbering up and loosening up.
Yu Wai Lin from Malaysia.
And you see that shake at the end of the staff. That kinetic energy is forced down into that end. About athletic prime. You see a very athletic individual here, the Brazilian.
Possibly a Chole foot form.
Quick change of direction, just from his, speaking strictly of his athletic platform. have to move to first early here. Jorge Perez, United States. Feel he's committed to this form, enjoying it, enjoying the moments.
Well, these athletes have traveled a long way to come to this competition, put in a lot of hours for that moment.
And regardless of how he places, you saw him make the most of that moment. He moves to second early. He is very present.
Republic of South Africa.
They're a big team. Partly why they're so loud, but it's also because they are having a great time, proud. See all the different angles and strikes with which the staff works. It's thrusting and spinning, using the side, the tip. Striking with the tip probably will generate the most impact because the power is over the smallest surface area. Pounds per square inch.
The monkey staff we have here. Francisco from Spain.
We're talking about the state of play, playing wushu. You feel it in the monkey staff. And you feel you want to see it, clearly. And that he wants to feel it. And I'm sure you've seen this many times. Sometimes it is the natural showman, you know, that chooses this type of performance. And sometimes it's a quiet individual that this is just a part of who they are, and they get to express that part.
Monkey staff is, monkey form is one of the forms that you have to be willing to commit to the character.
And for someone that may come very naturally. For others, it could be an incredibly enjoyable experience if you're not, you know, an extrovert by nature. This would be a time that you get to experience that.
Sure, I didn't practice monkey staff, but monkey bare hand form. It's a hard form. He's going to first place. He's excited about that.
He grabs your attention right away.
Attention please. Attention please. All the athletes who won the
Claudia showing us a very strong form, very clean movement.
There's something in his presence, and something that the tension-grabbing nature right from the get-go. You see it. I don't know if I have the verbiage to describe exactly why that is. Maybe it's just simple intensity or cleanliness of his expression.
Those movements, very intense, but often in WUSHU we say the energy coming from the competitor's eyes also makes a difference. So he also showed a great deal of speed and control, which is exciting to watch.
Eye-catching, yeah. Moves to second. Thought it would be between those two for now. Still 10 more scheduled. Vensky from the Republic of South Africa. 10 Henry Vensky. Crisp and to the point. I appreciated it. Another Russian. No, the Italian. Claudio Di Benedetto. Benedetto. Doing very well. It's good. But you can see the difference between him and a few of the recent competitors who were at the very top. If we do see that, Tony, what is it that we're seeing? What?
This flower is striking. The backwards. Can also parry movements away, knock movements away, and strike at the same time.
Marian Susadek? Susdeka? Slovak. Done. We'll try to stay in that top 10. We get to our final 6. Australian Gerard
Donovan.
very present as well. I feel like although he is still developing, you feel like this is he is giving us his best performance. And that's what these men and women are hoping for, is to get the best out of themselves where they are in their evolution. And I bet he feels like he did just that.
Well, as we pointed out, these athletes have trained for a long time in preparing for this competition.
Julien, Frenchman. We saved the best for last. The afternoon session of day 2, the 7th World Kungfu Championships. We take a look back at Julien's work. Seventh.
Yassine. Belly. Tunisia.
Not a short form, complicated, and gets all the way through it beautifully.
Looks like we have Claudio Pardo from Italy coming up. Or Yassine from Tunisia. Maybe. Let's see. No, Claudio.
I believe he is our second last. Second from the end. Anthony Capelazzo is our last. We'll see.
Claudio showing us a very precise performance.
Late in the day, he seems experienced, but late in the day, controlling your emotion and your intensity and your level of mental arousal is a challenge, but he's performing very well late in the day. There's a party atmosphere in here. Everybody appreciates it. None more than his Italian compatriots. Take a look. He saw his score before we did. He was hoping for more. He did beautifully. This will be our last competitor, men's Group C in the staff. Anthony Capelazzo of Brazil. Nothing left to save it for. He's been waiting for this.
Very dynamic performance from Anthony.
And emotional. It's loud in here. Beautifully done. I love the atmosphere. This has been a pleasure all day long today. Always my pleasure and privilege to work with you, Tony. Anthony Capolazzo
Willed his way onto third place.
beautifully done. We have seen the broadsword, the southern broadsword, the long sword. We've seen two-handed swords handled so beautifully. And we saw the staff here down the line. It has been our pleasure. Tony Sims, I thank you, and I thank you, our viewers, for joining us in the afternoon session, day 2, the 7th World Kung Fu Championships from Emeishan, China. Tony, thank you very much for today.
Thanks so much, Robin. It's been a joy.
And until
Real pleasure.
tomorrow, my friends, enjoy the hostilities.